to the budget speech by the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana. And we've seen the reaction coming through as far as the budget speech is concerned. And the question is, who was this budget actually aimed for at? Obviously, ESCOM had dominated the budget, but more importantly, looking at some of the key issues, the rebates and the incentives for solar panels for businesses and for people who are in the tax bracket. But what about the poor? And also at the same time, looking at social grants, again, against rising inflation, and these increases are actually below inflation. And that is the reason why we are taking reaction this morning. And right now, we're going across to the Secretary General and Member of Parliament of the Good Party, Brett Herron. Brett, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Yes, I see the statement that has come out from a Good Party that this budget has been for the rich. Just your reaction and some of the issues that are of concern to you, Brett.
Well, I think it starts with welcoming the unexpected economic growth from 2022, which came in at 2.5% above projections, and of course the windfall in tax collections, which exceeded projections as well. But none of those benefits really accrue to the people who need support the most, and that is the poor in South Africa. So we have this extra revenue, and we don't apply it to assist poor families. And we can start with the 350 Rand per month COVID grant. It's been 350 Rand per month since 2020, so that's three years. Now we're going into the fourth year. The president hinted that there would be an increase in that grant. It didn't come. The Treasury and the Minister of Finance still treat that grant as a temporary measure, saying it ends in 2024. And there's just no way that once you give poor people a small basic income of 350 Rand per month, that you can suddenly withdraw it from 8 million people who are relying on it. And really, we wanted to see that basic income grant translated into a proper basic income in terms of Section 27 of our Constitution. So just in the social grant space, there's a huge failure to allocate the additional revenue and additional unexpected income to support families who need it most.
Yes, and also I think the key issue here is apart from just the social grants, and I know you make mention of the old age pensioners, and we're looking at child grants and the like as well. But looking at ESCOM that had to a large extent dominated the budget, and also looking at ESCOM, looking at debt relief that has been allocated to ESCOM, but looking at these tax incentives, the installations of solar panels, and we know that solar systems don't come cheap at all. So it is only those who can afford it that will take advantage of these rebates and incentives that was announced by the minister.
Well, that's, I think, my point as well when I said that this is a budget for the rich. The tax incentive is capped at 15,000 Rand, and it's a once-off incentive, so it only applies in the next financial year. But, it's a rebate. In other words, you, as a family, have to incur the cost of installing a solar power system into your home, and then you claim it at the end of the tax year, and so you may get the rebate in late 2024, early 2025. So, but in order to install a solar power system, I mean, I've looked for my own home. You're looking upwards of 150,000 Rand for a basic solar power system. So for most ordinary households or families on middle income who own a property or have a property that's mortgaged with a bank, but in other words, are homeowners, to come up with 100,000 Rand in order to install this system is going to eliminate most of us from being able to participate. So again, it's a small rebate that the rich will benefit from, but it's not going to enable households to convert their rooftops into a source of renewable energy, because none of us are going to be able to afford the upfront costs. What the government should have been doing is looking at a financing scheme to enable more of us to pay that upfront cost. So in other words, a financing scheme linked to your municipal rates bill as you pay off your municipal rates, so you're paying off the cost of the installation of the system over 20 years. That would have made all of our roofs available for renewable energy.
Exactly, and I think there have been certain missed opportunities here, Brett, and the government, we know the pressure that the country is at this point in time, and also economically, but also at the same time looking at foreign investment, looking at confidence in the South African economy, and I think this is where there have been certain missed opportunities.
Well, I think that on the whole, the budget will probably be very pleasing for the ratings agencies, because the minister sort of projected a surplus in this coming financial year, and seems to have taken some steps to stabilize Eskom's debt, which I think will please ratings agencies. Have taken steps to close the loopholes that put us at risk of grey listing in terms of money laundering. I think there's some steps that the state took that will please investors through pleasing rating agencies. But I mean, the question arises, you may please the rating agencies, but there's still 18 million South Africans who live in absolute poverty, and they're not assisted much in this budget. And so, the additional revenue and the stabilization of our fiscal system and our government is welcome. And ultimately, surplus should be used for providing services to those needed most. And what's the point of having a surplus if we don't use it for those who need it?
Well, Brett, thank you very much for that and for your time with us this morning. We wish you well.
Thank you so much.
Brett Heron, good Secretary General and Member of Parliament, and we're going straight across now to be joined by Ahmed Manzoor Sheikh Imam, the leader of the NFP. Ahmed Manzoor Sheikh Imam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And shukran for having me on the air this morning.
Yes, yesterday was a big day, the presentation of the budget, but overshadowed somewhat with the shenanigans playing out at Eskom and the revelations of Andre de Ruyter. But just your reaction to the budget, and do you think the finance minister, did a balancing job, or is there a lot more he could have done?
Well, first of all, we have mixed feelings about the budget itself. We welcome any relief, particularly the no increases in fuel levies, road accident fund and things. Of course, the threshold that has been increased for the lower income. But nothing really significant, particularly for the number of people in the country, the most vulnerable people in the country that go home hungry to bed every night. Nothing really for the 70% at least of unemployed youth in the country in terms of job creation. Nothing in enhancing the manufacturing sector to boost growth in the country. The issue of Eskom 254 billion. The question is when, and exactly when will we stop using taxpayers' money to bail out the state-owned entities? Another 1 billion rand is going to SAA, but we heard a week ago that SAA is no longer insolvent. And, for me, one would think that the rating agencies will raise concerns of the high levels of debt in the country, and which is going to go in the medium term to almost 6 trillion, 5.8 trillion. Now, but on the other hand, they are not raising concerns about that, because I think they are also manipulating the entire system. to the extent that, you would express caution, particularly when a country like South Africa, with the low economic growth currency and is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing to sustain itself, you'd raise concerns. And yet there's not much concerns around that. And we're talking about borrowing a lot more. Even with some of what we want to implement now, we're going to borrow again. Okay? The windfall that we had in the country through commodity prices and the coal and all these things, I think that maybe we should have given more relief to the 13% taxpayers that pay taxes, are only people who pay taxes in this country, so that, they would have more money, there will be more money in circulation, and you can boost economic growth to that. But you cannot only be targeting that 13%. There are lots and lots of people in this country, particularly the foreign businesses, owned businesses, that don't pay any taxes. And I think that if they go out there and collect more taxes from these people, there will be less of a burden on that 13%, which is what they rely on, 13% looking after the rest of the country. I mean, I think it's totally unacceptable. They talk about a lot of money, 900 billion into infrastructure over the medium term, 900 billion. And we know that we do not have the capacity to implement these projects. We know that. If you look at the money that they want, he's talking about spending in Transnet and things. Many shipping companies have diverted their ships from the South African ports to the neighboring ports. So you're not going to get that business back. I can tell you now, it's gone. So they're not addressing the real challenges. Now, Eskom's problem is not only money. And I can tell you now, I'm almost convinced that this infighting in the ANC and others are sabotaging the Eskom. You can't tell me that 5 and 6 units, all of them break down at the same time, yet, and it's happening repeatedly. So I think the problem is bigger than actual just money, but it's also unfair that the taxpayer must continue to bear the brunt of bailing out these state-owned entities only because they've been mismanaged, maladministered through corruption and looting, which is continuing at the moment.
Well, we're going to have to leave it at that, and I know you and I can spend the better part of the next half an hour discussing or unpacking some of the issues that we've raised. But unfortunately, time is of the essence. But Jazakallah khairan so much, as always, for your time with us here on Salam Media and for providing your reaction to the budget. Inshallah, at some point in time, we will talk again. But for now, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That was Ahmed Manzoor Sheikh Imam. We're going to go for a quick break. We come back, we'll be joined by Sheikh Saeed Nkani, the Sun Party leader.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
There's no smell that takes me back to the comfort of my childhood than the smell of flaxseed oil being applied by my nanny. Now I'm using Tib Blackseed in my own home to soothe sniffles and coughs, to help with digestion and immunity, and of course, as part of my beauty routine. After all these years, I've come to appreciate the wisdom in finding comfort and shifa in trusted treatments like Tib Blackseed. You can find Tib Blackseed at all leading pharmacies or find out more at blackseed.co.za.
Deadly earthquakes struck Turkey and Syria, leaving communities devastated and in dire need of assistance. Over 8,000 buildings and homes were reduced to rubble. Over 9,000 people have been confirmed dead, with hundreds of thousands seriously injured. Families and communities are in disarray as search and rescue operations continue day and night. Islamic relief teams are on the ground providing vital emergency relief to the affected communities. Your support enables us to provide food, medical care, and emergency shelter. Donate now and help us save lives. Visit www.islamic-relief.org.za.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Well, we continue with the broadcast this morning, taking reaction at the budget speech and the initiatives and the measures that were announced yesterday in the budget. And we're going now to join the Sun Party leader, Sheikh Said Nkani. Sheikh Said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. To you, by the listeners, and Jazakallah khairan for the opportunity.
Sheikh Said, we've seen reaction coming through as far as the budget is concerned. There are those that hold the view that the finance minister did a good balancing job, considering where we are, dominated by Eskom, obviously, but also at the same time looking at a number of initiatives, talking about rebates and incentives for businesses and people installing solar panels, but also at the same time bailing out the likes of the state-owned enterprises and very little for the poor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is very true. What I can say, as we all know, that the state budget by the finance minister, which is more like a document which is speaks to anticipated tax revenues for the incoming financial year and proposed spending and expenditure. But what you will notice is that in the budget speech, our treasury, they are similar like the entire government, that they like to treat symptoms. They don't want to go to the root of the problems. They only treat on top, and then they don't go to the deep root of the problems. Most of the presentation which was made by the minister, which was all about bailing out. For instance, as you know, that our budget is a 2.24 trillion rand budget, and then you have a debt of Eskom which is beyond 400 billion rand, and which will be paid 70 billion, 80 billion over a period of 5 years to 2026. And then the budget the government is taking 250 billion to pay Eskom. And bear in mind, before we speak about the poor, what are they getting from out of this, and what do they feature, of which they don't feature anyway. Bear in mind that most of the money that the minister is talking about, the government doesn't have the money. The government solely relies on the tax revenue to take money from taxpayers. The government itself does not have the money, but all this money they are talking about is the money that will be taken from the taxpayers. And the worst part is that our government is severely relying and depending on institutions like the IMF, as well as the World Bank, and borrowing. And this is a burden not only for us, but for many coming generations who they have to pay this debt. And the poor are not featured in all this. For instance, you look at your social grant. Half of the population is relying on social grants. And social grants are not the solution. The solution is to create industries so that the poor men on the street, they can work and they can feed their family. And if you're looking at it, 60% of the budget, 60% is going to social services, like your education, your social grants, your health and other stuff. But if you focus on the education itself, the education that is being given to our kids is a toxic education which makes our children to become slaves. Yesterday, I'll make an example. I was talking to one young girl. I'm asking her, what are you doing? She's saying that I didn't make mistake, but I have nothing to do. I don't have money to go and register. And so I cried. I thought I would have a bright future. But the education that our children have been given, at least if the agriculture, they are learning from school how to plant, how to live from the land. At least you will be a matriculant waiting to go to teacher, but you can be able to provide food for yourself. most even the education itself, it's a toxic education. And the worst part is that, the concept of the entire curriculum needs to be reviewed. The concept of Ubuntu, the concept of you are because I am because you are, it's not there in the curriculum. Everybody is thinking about themselves. It's such a curriculum which is very capitalistic and which you can be as rich, but if you don't care about the next person, it's like you're not shooting the symptoms. There's a government must invest a lot in moral regeneration and renew the curriculum. If you look at
Yes.
countries
Sheikh Said, sorry, Maf, can I stop you that I have got limited time, unfortunately. We are actually pressed for time, but these are issues that need to be discussed, and I'm sure at some point in time we will be talking about these issues in a lot more detail. At this point in time, we're just testing reaction on the budget. We've got a number of analysts on standby as well, and Jazakallah for your time right now, and inshallah at some point in time we will talk again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sheikh Said Nkane is the Sun Party leader, and we're going across now to be joined by Matshidiso Lenkowasa, budget researcher at Section 27. Matshidiso, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I hope that you can hear me clearly.
Yes, now we can hear you loud and clear. Do you think the finance minister did a good job? Did he do a balancing job against where we find ourselves economically, against the global economic climate, Matshidiso?
So while I recognize and while we as an organization recognize that Treasury and the Finance Minister were in a tough position considering the concurrent states of disaster South Africa finds itself in, and then a global economic outlook that is not so favorable. However, we are disappointed and we don't think that he has done a particularly great job in the budget speech in prioritizing social spending areas, particularly education and healthcare. So it seems that from our perspective, the cost or the funding for education and healthcare, while they are increasing, they're not increasing in line with inflation overall. And so that means the value of the investments in education and healthcare is eroding at the expense of like paying off state-owned entity debt, interest on that debt.
Well, this is seems to be a general sentiment that the budget has been for the rich, and it hasn't focused a lot on some of the critical areas. And you mentioned health and education, which are just two issues, but also dominated by Eskom, the problems at Eskom, the bailout of Eskom and other state-owned entities, but also at the same time looking at all these incentives, because that seems to be the big talking point, solar panels, solar system. But how many people can really take advantage of these incentives?
It's true. Yeah. We also have a similar criticism, especially considering, and we'll go back to the healthcare system. So in South Africa, more than 80% of the country uses public healthcare, so the overwhelming majority of the country. And this is only increasing as we find rising unemployment in the country, so more people are losing their jobs, and so they have to be dependent on the healthcare system. And in this context of load shedding, it's important that hospitals are running even during load shedding, right? Because people's lives are at risk. Unfortunately, the budget does not reflect or have any provision for how hospitals are supposed to do that because their budgets are being cut. So it's concerning that the overwhelming majority of South Africans are relying on a healthcare system that is probably not going to be fully functional, already is collapsed post the pandemic, but it's only set to get worse, and there's no provision or any allocation of funding to fix this problem.
Well, that is the issue, and also pumping all this money into SOEs, and we know what has happened in the past, bailout after bailout, but also there has been a lack of oversight, and the government now saying that they are going to monitor these SOEs, they're going to scrutinize them, very, very closely, and the same would go for the Eskom, the debt relief that Eskom so much requires. How confident are we, Matshidiso?
So I think there's so many reasons in this country to feel like we can't be confident or we've lost hope in that. So definitely like the investment that has been going into the money that's been going into these state-owned entities and bailing them out, it almost feels like it's being thrown into a bottomless pit where there's so much money being thrown, but we're not seeing any improvement. I think that, so the confidence on our side, is like quite cautious. It seems unlikely. I don't really know. Like I want to be optimistic, but it just doesn't seem great. And the best case scenario of a situation like this, where we're taking money from, areas of social protection, education, and healthcare, is that we have a situation where maybe, in the future we might end up resolving our energy crisis in the country, but we'll do that at the expense of a future generation of adults who are equipped to solve future social crises, or there's an education issue there. So there's that disinvestment in other areas at the expense of giving our state-owned entities another chance. We're quite cautious about that.
Well, we have every reason to be cautious, and there's just so much that has been playing out and that has played out in the past. But for now, Matshidiso, thank you very much for your time with us this morning here on Salam Media.
Thank you very much.
Matshidiso Lenkowasa, budget researcher at Section 27, and we're going to go for a break. We come back. We will be introducing to you the DA mayoral candidate for the city of Tshwane, Cilliers Brink.